Hey everyone, welcome to my Season 14 Dance of Knives guide. I will be playing Dance of Knives a lot in the upcoming season, so I put this planner together for all the variants that I plan on playing. Dance of Knives is going to be very strong in Season 14. Starting off with the leveling variant, one of the most important things I look for early on is movement speed on the amulet and boots. You won't want to replace those unless it's an upgrade for movement speed. This helps Dance of Knives a lot because it's a channeling skill, so moving around faster while channeling will make this build a lot smoother to play. Secondly is always upgrading the melee weapons every chance we get. The damage from Dance of Knives is based off our melee weapons, so it will be very important to look for swords or daggers while you level. The bow or crossbow is just a stat stick for this build, so you won't have to worry about upgrading those as often. Other than that, I would prioritize Dex and defensive stats. Dex is a nice boost to damage early on because we have so little. Now for the skills. I like to start off with Heartseeker at level 1, but any basic skill works. At level 3, we can add Dance of Knives, but at this point we won't be able to channel it much until level 5 when we get Blade Shift Energy. With this setup, we get energy every time we pass through an enemy, so this will allow us to channel Dance of Knives without interruption. If there's no enemies around, then you should stop channeling and use Dash, Shadow Step, or just mount up and find a new pack of mobs to fight. If you aren't passing through enemies while channeling Dance of Knives, you will run out of energy. At level 6, we choose energy cost reduction on Dance of Knives to make it even easier to channel without issues. Level 8, we get Dark Shroud for a nice boost to toughness. Then at level 12, we get the movement speed node, which gives us 5% movement speed per shadow. Dark Shroud gives us 5 shadows, so that will give us 25% movement speed at 5 shadows. However, when we get hit, you will lose a shadow. So just make sure to be using Dark Shroud every time it's off cooldown. At level 10, we go with Pierce and Size on Dance of Knives. This gives us a nice little boost to our AoE damage. Level 13 is a big level because we unlock Shadow Imbuement, which is probably one of my favorite skills while leveling. Every time we kill something that's infected by Shadow Imbuement, they explode, causing large AoE damage. This can cause a chain reaction and clear your entire screen with explosions. It's a lot of fun. Then at level 15, we go with Star Shards on Dance of Knives for another boost to AoE damage. At level 19, we replace Shadow Step with Shadow Clone. You won't be able to keep Shadow Clone up at all times, so this skill is best used on bosses or elite packs. Or you could replace Shadow Step with Poison Imbuement, which is also really strong versus bosses and elite packs. I preferred going with both Shadow Imbuement and Poison Imbuement, but going with Shadow Clone is a lot simpler to play. It's up to you. Both options are really good. If you go with Poison Imbuement, then be aware that we can only have one imbuement active at a time. So you would use Shadow Imbuement most of the time and then switch to Poison Imbuement on bosses or elites. At level 20, we unlock Inner Sight as our specialization. This will help a lot with energy while channeling Dance of Knives. At level 23, we go with Endemic on Shadow Imbuement. This will help reset the cooldown of Shadow Imbuement. Also at level 23, we go with Toxic Touch on Poison Imbuement. This will increase our poison damage if you went the double imbuement route. At this point, you will just focus on every skill point into Dance of Knives until it's maxed out. Then we put skill points into Shadow Imbuement and Poison Imbuement equally. Keep both skills around the same rank as each other because both imbuement skills will be important. Or if you level with Shadow Clone, then you'll want to increase Shadow Imbuement ranks until level 30. At level 30, I would switch out Shadow Imbuement for Poison Imbuement. If you went the Shadow Clone route, Poison Imbuement is just better for elites and bosses, and the higher level we get, the more Shadow Imbuement starts to drop off in damage. I added an extra leveling path with Grenade Jumper on Dance of Knives. This turns it into a grenade skill that is more of a melee build. I would switch out the specialization from Inner Sight to combo points. You'll always be playing in melee range with this setup, so combo points is easy to keep up and it will do more damage. And that's basically it for the leveling path. As you can see, there are plenty of options with Dance of Knives to fit any playstyle, and so I tried to add multiple paths to cover each playstyle. If you want to keep it simple for leveling, then I would start off with the seasonal quest line. This will give you a quick boost in levels right off the start, then immediately start running war plans all the way to level 70. I would prioritize back-to-back Hell Tides. These are quick and easy to complete, especially with the Realm Walker event. Realm Walker event and Hell Tides is actually a lot of fun. After that, I would prioritize Pit, then Undercity, then Nightmare Dungeons, and then Infernal Hordes in that order for war plans. After level 25, every 5 levels you can gamble at the Obol vendor if you have Obols for 2 swords to get a quick damage increase, or you can buy weapons from vendors. Once you hit level 70, you will continue this build until you get 5 pieces of the Sightless set, or the Spellbound Still set if you choose to go that path. Then you can move on to the starter variant, but you can immediately start following the Paragon board on the starter variant. Once you get 5 pieces of the Sightless set, I would switch to the starter build. With the Sightless set, we'll get a ton of damage with the 2-piece and 5-piece set bonuses and damage reduction. The important details of how to play this build is every time we use Shadow Clone, it resets the cooldown of Concealment, and then every time we enter Stealth, it reduces the cooldown of Shadow Clone by 6 seconds. When we enter Concealment and Dash, we enter Stealth, so the way it works is we start off with Poison Imbuement, Concealment, Shadow Clone, and then we channel Dance of Knives. Using Shadow Clone and Concealment doesn't interrupt our Dance of Knives channeling, so while channeling, you'll want to use Shadow Clone and then Concealment right after. Dash can be used to dodge if needed, but more importantly, we want to conserve it for when Shadow Clone eventually goes on cooldown. With the Sentry node on Shadow Clone, we get 3 uses, so by the time we use all 3 charges, we need to weave in at least 1 dash, which will usually be enough to keep Shadow Clone off cooldown. You don't want to use Shadow Clone more than once a second or it will have a cooldown. Every time we use Shadow Clone, it makes everything on the screen vulnerable and weakened. But if you don't want to use Shadow Clone as often, then you can put a Cursed Touch on the boots, and this will take care of vulnerable. Then you would only use Shadow Clone and Concealment once every 6 seconds to keep all of the Sightless set buffs active. For aspects, we want to prioritize Aspect of Channeling on the bow or crossbow, whichever one you're using. This is the strongest damage increase option that we have. On the amulet, we want Crushing. It's the second strongest aspect that we have. We get Fortify every time we use Concealment from the Recuperate node. Malice is the third strongest aspect for this build because every time we use Concealment, we also knock down everything around us because of the Recuperate node. It's a very strong option. Alchemical Advantage is strong because attack speed increases Dance of Knives damage and provides more lucky hit, which helps us proc Call of the Nameless a lot more often. Call of the Nameless is strong for this build because it will apply even more poisoning damage every time it procs. Aspect of Imitated Imbuement is really important because with the Sightless set, we get a permanent shadow. Along with Shadow Clone, this will cause all shadows to mimic the current imbuement that we use. However, in Season 13, the shadows from Shadow Clone Sentry were bugged, so our imbuments were not applying to them. This is fine because the Sentry option is only to help spam Shadow Clone to apply vulnerable and easier uptime on the Sightless set buffs. So even if it's still bugged in Season 14, this build will still work. After that, the rest of the aspects simply increase our damage. Writhing aspect is very strong for pushing or on lair bosses that take longer than 5 to 10 seconds to kill, but if you're not fighting bosses that take long to kill or pushing, I don't suggest using it. As for defensive aspects, the strongest one is Aspect of Disobedience. At maximum stacks, we'll get 45% damage reduction. The second strongest, I believe, is Debilitating Toxins. We will always be applying poison damage, so these are the best options that provide the most damage reduction, followed by Glenn's Anvil and then Cheats Aspect, which is only good for leveling because it also provides a small amount of movement speed. If you happen to find a Mott Rune early on, then I would use that and take Dark Shroud off the skill bar. Dark Shroud has a long cooldown, so it's very common to lose shadows before Dark Shroud is usable again. I'd much rather run Mott Rune for Dark Shroud because this ensures we almost always have 5 shadows active. You can combine Mott with either Zan or Neo. Both options are fine. You can then add either Shadow Step for more movement options or add Blade Shift, which is nice for 60% added to damage, 15% movement speed, and resistance to all elements. And the later variants will use Blade Shift, so you might as well get used to using it. The most important offensive stats for this build is Damage Over Time Multiplier and Vulnerable Damage Multiplier. This will increase your damage substantially with this build and should always be prioritized over everything else. All damage or poison damage multipliers is also very strong, but similar damage increase to a dex roll. Both all damage and poison damage multipliers are essentially the same, so either one is fine for this build. On gloves and amulets, poison damage multiplier can roll slightly higher than all damage, but it's not a big deal if you get either one. The rest of our offensive slots, all damage and poison damage, rolls are the same. Vulnerable damage multiplier can only roll on gloves and jewelry slots, so it's a priority stat on all 4 pieces, followed by damage over time multiplier. On the amulet, we get ranks to all skills, which is very strong for this build because we can add skill ranks to both Dance of Knives and Poison Imbuement. Both of these skills increase our damage, so we basically get to double dip on damage. You can use either swords or daggers for this build. Swords do slightly more damage, but you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the two, so just go with the best drops you find. On the Paragon board, you want to start off with just focusing on unlocking legendary nodes. These will give us by far the biggest boost to damage until we get our glyphs ranked up to at least 25 to 50. I wouldn't switch until you have them near rank 50 and at least 100 to 150 Paragon points, because before that, the legendary nodes just provide a ton of damage. The strongest starting glyph, I believe, is tracker. This extends our poison damage duration by 40%. After that, I would go with versatility, then bane, efficacy, and canny. The assassin glyph was bugged in season 13, but if it's fixed in season 14, then it's going to also be a strong option. While testing this setup, I was able to reach Torment 8 with no runes, no glyphs, no unique charm, and no ancestral gear. So it's a very strong build. Well, that's it for the starter variant. So let's jump into the Spellbound Still starter variant. If you go with the Spellbound Still set, the set is very similar to Sightless starter variant. The starter variant is similar to the Sightless starter. We use mostly the same skills and aspects, but I added Conceited and True Sight. Since I didn't get to play this set last season, I'm not sure what aspects will be the best with this setup, so I will be updating this part of the guide in season 14 when I get to test it all. For the Spellbound Still set, we get Inner Sight for free through lucky hit procs. This allows us to run Preparation, which means we get 2 specializations at the same time, which is really cool. The 2-piece set bonus on Spellbound Still gives us a 9% lucky hit chance to activate Inner Sight. While Inner Sight is active, our imbuement skills get Shadow Imbued by default, so while using Poison Imbuement, this means we also get Shadow Imbuement active at the same time. The 3-set bonus automatically drinks a healing potion every 4 seconds and gives us 30% max life. The 5-piece set bonus gives us all side upgrades on imbuement skills for free and increases their potency by 200% and grants 50% lucky hit chance. Also, while Inner Sight is active, our imbuement skill applies all imbuments. This means when we use Poison Imbuement, we also apply Cold and Shadow Imbuement effects, including their side nodes, at the same time. This is really powerful, especially for Torment 12 content. This set sounds like a ton of fun to use, and I cannot wait to use it in Season 14. Last season, it had a lot of bugs, and it didn't work with Dance of Knives at all, so I never got the chance to try it. But in Season 14, they fixed it all, so I can't wait to jump in and play it. Getting all imbuments and the side nodes at the same time while Inner Sight is active will provide Barrier, Vulnerable, Ferocity, Energy, Resolve, and Overpower. So this basically solves every problem we have when trying to make a build for Rogue. When Inner Sight ends, I believe it has a 4-second cooldown before it can activate again. I don't know if this works the same for the Spellbound Still set. I just know that's how it works when you use Inner Sight as the specialization. So I'm not entirely sure if we're going to get all of the bonuses from every imbuement at all times if Inner Sight has a 4-second cooldown. Since I didn't get to play it in Season 13, I don't really know how the set works exactly, so I will have to update this guide once I get to play it. So I should have the guide updated in the first week of Season 14. Alright, let's jump into the in-game variant. With the in-game variant, we had a Shaco for +6 to all skills, the very big damage boost for this build with the double dipping in Dance of Knives and Poison Imbuement, both of which increase our damage. We had Tibalt's Will for a nice damage boost and additional resource generation. Etna's Dagger is a very large damage increase with this build. It increases our non-physical damage and imbuement potency. This will give us 120% damage with a max roll. And now it also drops with imbuement ranks. This dagger drops off of Harbinger of Hatred, a greater lair boss. It's an item that I would suggest trying to obtain as soon as we start getting greater lair keys. If you get this item early, it will most likely allow you to skip multiple torment tiers. For the skills, we had Blade Shift to help us maintain overpower. You only have to use this skill on the first target because it will automatically refresh the buffs when we move through enemies. This works well with poison because everything usually stays alive long enough for us to move through it to refresh the buffs. I like to play with Shadow Step, but Dash also works with the setup. We use the Lack Rune for a lot of damage reduction. I believe it's around 40%. With just the Lack Rune and one defensive aspect, we can run Torment 12 without getting one shot, but you will not be able to stand in all the bad things. So make sure to avoid standing in all the ground effects the best you can. If you have defensive issues, then I would switch out Tibalt's Will with defensive pants. We add cooldown reduction to a ring, either one affix roll and a temper or 2 tempers, or 2 affix rolls will work. You want to reach 18% cooldowns so that we can keep Shadow Clone off cooldown. You'll be using Shadow Clone about once every second because this will be the main source of vulnerable. Every time we use Shadow Clone, it applies vulnerable screen wide. I prefer this setup because it allows us to run agile on the boots for a very large boost to movement speed above the cap. Max roll is 30% and it also adds 10% dodge. Combining that with 15% from Blade Shift, 25% from Dark Shroud, we can get up to 70% movement speed above the cap. It's a lot of fun once you get it fully set up. On the charms, I plan on using Gold drop rate as an SSF player. Gold was the biggest struggle last season while playing solo. They did buff Gold drop rates, but we'll see if it was enough, but I doubt about it. Now that we can change one affix at the enchanter on uniques, we'll need even more gold than we did last season. I prefer Leirana's Paragon board over Dance Macabre's, but you can use either one. The attack speed and defensive nodes are overall better from Leirana's board. We don't run Inner Sight, but it doesn't matter. The legendary still applies the damage to our core skills, which is all we need from it. I did provide options for both boards depending on which setup you prefer. I like to run with Subo while farming because of the map pack he provides. Alright, well that's it for the in-game variant. Alright, now for the Spellbound still in-game variant. The gear is mostly the same as the Sightless sets because most of our damage is still coming from Dance of Knives and Poison Imbuement, so you will be able to switch between sets with ease. We just have to activate Shadow Clone once every 20 seconds and channel Dance of Knives while keeping Poison Imbuement active. Blade Shift will work the same as the previous variants. If we get all imbuments while Inner Sight is active, then we proc Etna's Dagger for free. If we have vulnerable issues, then you can put a Cursed Touch on the boots. I'm not sure how often Inner Sight will be active with this set, so we could have vulnerable issues. I'm not entirely sure. Darkshroud Overflow node and Tybalt's Will gets us more than enough resource with this setup. And we get Inner Sight from the Spellbound Still set, which also helps a lot with resources. For the Mythic variant, all uniques are Mythic now. Every affix on Mythics will drop at max value along with the unique aspect. Tempers will also always give max values, and changing an affix at the enchanter will also give max values. This will be more of a late game build to find them all. I didn't include Sea Lord's Fine Gloves because I believe these will be hard to get with the stats that we need. I added the Ashira's Dagger because as a mythic it will provide 65% damage and 21% attack speed, which is very nice for Dance of Knives. This combined with Alchemical Advantage and 4 stacks of Ferocity will get us to the attack speed cap. Attack speed scales our Dance of Knives damage, so this is a nice boost to our damage. For Mythic version 2, I added Crown of Lucian in place of Shaco. This should do more damage once you get a lot of skill ranks in Dance of Knives and Poison Imbuement, maybe around 25 to 30, but it comes at a high cost for solving resource issues. If you don't have a Ring of Starless Skies, then you'll need 3 resource cost reduction tempers on rings and the amulet, Overflow node from Darkshroud, and Tybalt's Will. If you happen to get a Mythic Sea Lord's Fine Gloves, then you won't need Overflow on Darkshroud. That's the only difference I made for version 2, so on to the Mythic Cold variant. As a quick disclaimer, Sea Lord's Fine Gloves was bugged last season and working with Star Shard's Dance of Knives, which is a marksmanship skill, but Sea Lord's Fine Gloves is only supposed to work with cutthroat skills. If it's still bugged in season 14, then I would suggest using these on the gloves or the charm slot. If you use it as a charm, then you won't want to use a Shaco or a Crown of Lucian, and instead you'll use a Cal of the Nameless. This will overall do more damage, but I don't know if this is still bugged in season 14, but if it is, I will change the planner as soon as I find out. With the cold variant, a lot of things change. We run Tybalt's Will as a charm so we can use Death's Pavane in the pants slot. Mythic version will provide 117% damage at 3 stacks. Every time we move through the daggers that appear on the ground from Death's Pavane, we will also get 25 energy. We add a Scoundrel's Kiss combined with Ferocious on the amulet. That will get us up to 13 stacks of Ferocity. At 13 stacks, this will give us 253% damage. The non-mythic version of Scoundrel's Kiss will provide 195% damage, so it's a big difference. If you have a Ring of Starless Skies, you can use that in place of the legendary ring with channeling. Move channeling to the legendary weapon in place of high velocity. You can then change the resource tempers to critical strike damage instead. We need to get crit chance on gloves, rings, and the amulet. We go with crit chance tempers on the bow or crossbow and the legendary sword or dagger, depending on which ones you have. We get even more crit chance from calculation on concealment, which also provides overpower to activate Tybalt's Will. Etna's temper will need to be a lucky hit elemental damage because we have to do 2 types of elemental damage to proc the dagger. It can be any element other than holy and cold. We do cold damage from cold imbuement, and in season 13, holy damage was bugged and didn't proc Etna's dagger. But everything else was fine. For bossing, we switched to Respite and Dirk in place of the legendary dagger or sword. Replaced Tybalt's Will charm with an Azarath charm. On the charms, you can get lucky hit crowd control effects like Daze, Immobilize, and Stun. This will help stagger bosses much faster. You will do most of your damage during the stagger phase of a boss fight, and then with Azarath, all of the damage you do during the stagger phase will be applied after the stagger ends, which usually is enough to finish the boss. If you aren't killing a lair boss in one stagger phase, you might want to consider reducing the Torment tier. The Paragon board stays mostly the same, but we replace Tracker Glyph with Control, we replace Bane with Combat, and we replace Efficacy with Devious. You can replace Agile Aspect with Earth Strikers, for more damage, or Mending Obscurity to get Fortify. It's entirely up to you. I like moving around fast, so I prefer Agile. That's pretty much it for the cold version. Now on to the push variants. So for the Sightless push variant, it's very similar to the Mythic setup, but this time we add a Mythic Shrouded Gift for damage reduction and to help us get access to Concealment because we won't have it on the bar. Every time we enter Concealment, it fortifies us for 20% of our health. This will help keep us alive. The more fortify we get, the more damage we can take. Just like before, if you can find a usable Sea Lord's Fine gloves, then you can go with legendary gloves and we can use an aspect of contamination instead. We would then equip a Cal of the Nameless and use Sea Lords in the charm slot. We go with back and Lack Room for damage reduction, and Sir Mott for Dark Shroud. On the push variants, we use Writhing on the two-hander to increase our poison damage by 250% at 10 stacks. This is great for pushing because everything we fight will last at least 10 seconds or more, so this provides a lot of damage. If we need more defensive options, then we can equip a Mythic Cal of the Nameless and use Endurant Faith in the charm slot. This will prevent one-shots and provide even more damage reduction. Alright, as for the Blurring Blade pushing variant, this is for the Cutthroat set. Blurring Blade is basically the same setup. I will be testing this in the first week of Season 14 to see how it does. I haven't used this set, so I have no idea how this will go. We just have to use an agility skill once every 8 seconds and crit at least once every 4 seconds to activate the 3-piece and 5-piece set bonus. Every crit activates the 5 set piece bonus, which lasts 4 seconds. Every attack will count as a backstab, so we get 250% damage and 40% attack speed in bucket 2. So this could be really good for Dance of Knives, but I need to test it next season. For resource, we will need Sea Lord's Fine gloves, either equipped or on the charm slot, and 3 resource tempers on jewelry. 2 of them would be resource cost reduction. The third would be lucky hit chance to restore resource. Or we could use a Ring Star the Skies and 1 resource temper that restores resource on lucky hit. Although on bosses, if we don't get lucky hit procs, we might run into resource issues. I still need to test that more. Alright, well that's all the variants for my Season 14 Dance of Knives guide. There's even more ways to play Dance of Knives, but these builds are going to be my main focus for Season 14. I hope this video helps you out, and if you have any questions at all, please leave a comment and I'll answer them as soon as I can. I'll be doing a 24-hour stream at the season start on YouTube and Twitch, so you can also drop by and ask me anything about the builds. If you enjoyed the video, then please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in Season 14.